We started in Minnesota with Governor Walz. Back to Minnesota here for just a moment. As you may be aware, my congressional district is a mix of really rural agricultural communities as well as suburban communities just outside the south of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So my question really to the panel, but perhaps we can start with Mr. Willis, is how can we make sure that any comprehensive infrastructure package that we come up with on this committee will really strengthen our rural communities throughout Minnesota's second and communities like mine? I want to make sure that we understand that America is a big place, and my towns and townships and cities all are very important, and we need to make sure that is represented in an infrastructure package.
Well, it has to be a priority, and I think one of the issues that gets to it is the question that we were discussing earlier, funding versus financing. And obviously, both of those have a role to play in sort of figuring out how you fund our nation's infrastructure. But I think especially in rural areas and what you're talking about, you have to do the funding. You know, financing can be a little tricky. You got to find projects. They're going to have some toll or some return or some way to pay that back. Again, there's a role there, but there's a lot of projects, rural, some rail projects that are going to need direct funding from the federal government, and that's why we're a big advocate of the gas tax to stabilize the Highway Trust Fund. I think it's always great when the labor movement and the AFL-CIO can agree on an issue, and this is one we agree on. So. I think doing the funding right gets to your rural issues quite well.
Thank you so much. Anyone else have any comments on how we make sure we prioritize the balance? Perhaps then my second question, importantly, we've talked about workforce development and recruiting and what can be done to make sure we have a workforce to deliver on the infrastructure needs. What we haven't talked about is the impact more broadly on those working families across our nation. So again, Mr. Willis, I'm going to pick on you in a very good way today because I think we haven't talked a lot about the knock-on effect of just making sure we have that kind of economic, robust growth plan for the country.
Well, as we've discussed earlier in the hearing, we are involved in these issues for a lot of reasons. Obviously, you create jobs when you do these projects. You have good operating jobs, but we're also at the table because the labor movement broadly represents workers that have to get to work every day, and many of our members drive and take the bus and rail, and there's a lot of multimodal needs out there, and there's a lot of mobility problems in both cities and suburbs and rural areas where people have trouble getting to work, and businesses are suffering, and we're hearing about it from our members. So it's not just when we talk about this creates good jobs, it's not just about the jobs that it immediately creates and people that work in the system. It's the ability to get people to the jobs that we know are out there. So it is a big part of why the labor movement participates in this debate.
Thank you so much. And I was the former head of HR, don't hold it against me, for a major Fortune 500 company for a number of years in the Twin Cities. And, my observation was when we have public sector investment, that certainly private sector investment follows, if not immediately soon after. So if I could ask, does anyone have any thoughts on just what impact it would have on your organization, perhaps UPS or others, if in fact that private sector growth followed public sector investment?
Sure, Congresswoman, I'd be glad to comment on that. Two programs that come to mind right off the top of my head at UPS. One's in the Chicagoland area, the other one's is in Louisville. And we've found a way to where we need a workforce. We're able to go into the community, provide education, assistance, if you would, meaning tuition. And it's not so much a tuition reimbursement. It's actually helping employees within the local colleges come together, create programs, create criteria, curriculums that not only support what we may need, but is important to the chamber, the businesses around our community in Louisville, we can support in that fashion. We have a similar program in the Chicagoland area. I will tell you, it works where there's a mass, and you need the mass to make it work. But those are just two examples. We found those to be extremely successful programs for both the community as well as the company.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Thank you.